And then I did Miss South Africa, and I think when I did Miss South Africa, I was 25. When we did a genetic test, we found that I have XY6 chromosomes. I don't have a uterus, I don't have ovaries. And how I found out that I'm intersex was like at the age where I was expecting my period to come, my period never came.
Hey, Taola. Welcome back to The Social with the Prince. Well, it's not really the Prince, but it's myself, Lebo. Welcome to today's episode. Like we mentioned with our last episode, we are in our Women's Month edition series where we will be unpacking several women conversations led by a woman for women. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. We appreciate the comments. Tell us what you want to hear, what you want to talk about, and we're doing this for you. So welcome back again. Today's topic is sure, one really interesting one. I want to first start by reading my guest's profile, which is a very strong one, extremely strong profile. A woman who wears so many hats, so beautifully, a striking beauty, I tell you. Before I get to who she is, so backstory of how I know her. Back in 2013, I think, just after graduation, during studies, I was called in by a good friend of mine to come and help tutor matric students from an underprivileged school. And naturally, my English skills came in part. I was an English tutor for matric students then, and I met one of the most gorgeous women ever. And she was a biochemistry and I think physics tutor. Naturally, intelligence, brains, beauty, all together, one thing. And we met then, and she's got such a warm spirit. She is so humble, gorgeous in and out. And just to unpack a bit more about her, but also, oh no, before I forget, she also was a guest speaker at one of my events. Those that know or those that don't, I have a beauty company. So when I launched the company in 2018, she came to come and speak, about just the impact of the beauty industry and the challenges and her positioning at the time. And she actually needs no introduction, to be quite frank with you guys, but she is a 2016 Miss SA Top 5 finalist. She is also the 2017 Miss Mamelodi Sundowns, as well as DIY guru. This part will also touch on and delve in. She can tell you how to maneuver your place to make it bigger, smaller, brighter, any way you would want. But also, she has recently, I don't know if I should say, put her sash and her heels aside to be in the running for maybe an Oscar one day. She's currently part of a documentary that is called Who I Am Not, which was released on the 11th of March. And it's, I think, a docu that has won a couple of awards, actually, including the best film in Being Oneself category at the DocEdge Festival in New Zealand, as well as a silver horn for the director of the film at the, I think it's Krakow Film Festival. I don't know how you say that. Krakow, if I got it correctly. But yes, I want to first start off with this documentary. Our guest today is the one and only Sharon-Rose Lehlogonolo Khumalo. Even the name has a ring to it. I think this name is Sharon-Rose. It sounds beautiful as she is.
Thank you.
Welcome,
Thank
Sharon.
you so much for having me. I'm really honored to be here.
Excited to have you.
I am so excited. This will double up as a catch up.
Right. And I think the first thing I want you just so I let you lead the conversation, because I think it's important that we allow you to have hold of this representation. So can we just first things first, let's talk about Who I Am Not.
Yes.
What is it, why, when, and how did it come about?
All right. So Who I Am Not is a documentary that follows two intersex people. And for those people who don't know what intersex is, so intersex is the term used to describe people born with biological variations that differ from the typical male and female. So, whereas we were taught at school that XX chromosomes are found in women or females, and then XY6 chromosomes lead to a male phenotype. Whereas in my case, I was diagnosed with I almost say melanogenesis, androgen insensitivity syndrome. So genetically, I have XY6 chromosomes, but as you can see, I am female and I was born female physically. And how I found out that I'm intersex was like at the age where I was expecting my period to come, my period never came. And then that led to me going to the doctor and finding out why exactly my period didn't come. And then we found out that I don't have a uterus, I don't have ovaries. And then when we did a genetic test, we found that I have XY6 chromosomes. And that's like a whole other topic on its own. But the documentary follows myself and Dimakatso, who uses they, them pronouns. And my pronouns are she, her. And Dimakatso as variation also, I don't remember exactly, but what the doctors then find out with them. But then they were born with ambiguous genitalia at birth, and then they had surgeries done on them as a child. So this documentary just follows myself and Dimakatso on the journey to self-discovery and self-identification, determination as intersex people. And I think you will see in the documentary, once it does come to South Africa, that the how we take so many things for granted when it comes to gender and gender roles and gender identity that really are highlighted by the intersex struggles. And I mean, we know that in rural times that oftentimes kids were killed at birth when they had ambiguous genitalia, where they didn't fit strictly into male and female. So this just highlights the need for intersex rights, because we just say intersex rights are human rights, because at the end of the day, all of us, we are just human. And what we're trying to do is just bring light to a very forgotten part of our humanity. And I think the most important thing is that in as much as the documentary is a story about intersex, it's a story about humanity, and which really touches on a lot of things such as infertility, family roles, family support, and how that comes into play, and things such as access to healthcare and how people find out. Because I think, I mean, it says that so for the incidence is about, I think, 1 in 20,000, which is about the same as a redhead. So, but then the thing is, you see how many redheads are there in the world, and you just have to think about that. There's just as many people that are intersex, and we really then think that because of that, a lot of people go through life with even not finding out that they are intersex, and they maybe just have, oh, I can't have kids, which is often the most implication. But there's many different other things that could lead to that. But what the film does is that it just brings intersex issues to light.
Sure. That's powerful. And how were you found for the film? How did that work?
Yes. So how I was found. So I did Miss South Africa. Well, I found out, first of all, let's start with finding out about being intersex. I found out that I'm intersex when I was 21, which is a long time ago. When I was 21, that's when I found out. And then I did Miss South Africa. And I think when I did Miss South Africa, I was 25, right? And all this time, I think there was a lot of secrecy around it. So I was very most of my close friends and family knew, but not a lot of people knew about it. And I think at the time, there was this whole secrecy and really hiding that fact about me, that I was not really embarrassed, but then you're just told, I didn't tell everybody, and actually like the secrecy around it, right? And then after I did Miss SA, I didn't win. And then in May of that year, I watched a video by Les Brown, and he asked this question, and he said, what would you do if you weren't scared? And it was as if he was talking to me personally. And I just went on Instagram, and then I just sort of came out publicly that I am intersex. And then people obviously then started asking, oh my gosh, what is intersex? No. And all the natural questions followed. And then I started, you know what? What's the best way? Let me write a blog. I had a following from Miss South Africa. So I started a blog, and then I would just share all my blogs on my Twitter and everything. And then the blog gained a bit of traction where I just explained exactly what is intersex and the variation that I have and how I found out. And one of those people who was reading that was the executive director, Tunde Skobran. She's from Romania, but then lives in Los Angeles, California in the US. And then she tracked me down and she commented on there and she sent me emails. And I'm like, who is this lady trying to talk to me? And I'm just like, and also, I mean, it's not a very common name. I'm just like, who is this lady? I read up on her and everything. And then eventually she came to South Africa. She was following a story on Intersex. But then we ended up talking and then we did a few test shots and she's like, oh my gosh, I think we've got something here. So then she found Dimakatso and then we all started filming. So the whole process took about 5 years to film from start to finish.
Because recently 2015, yes.
So the whole process took about 5 years to finish. So we officially finished filming last year, August. And then the editing started. So they had been editing all the time. And then we've been to film festivals such as South by Southwest in where I went in Austin, and then also Thessaloniki, but I didn't get to go to Thessaloniki. And then we went to the British Film Institute in London. So that was really cool. So I got to travel as well. And then we are expecting a few more events as well around the film. And then I cannot wait to actually have a screening for South Africa because, I mean, this is a South African story. And I'm so excited about that. But the whole process took about 5 years to finish.
So for you, I know you mentioned, when you said after the pageant, you then decided to come out and say, this is who I am. Why did you feel the need to say, listen, this is it and this is who I am?
So one of the things that I realized was the misinformation that was around intersex. So, I mean, as you know, intersex is included in the LGBT, and then so it's LGBTAI plus, and then just including all those underrepresented either sexual orientations or gender identification or genders. And I remember the one time I was sitting at lunch with a couple of friends of mine, and they didn't know at this time that I'm intersex.
Okay.
And then we talked about intersex. And just hearing the way that people spoke about intersex and just the misinformation around it, I'm like, could you imagine? I'm like, here you are in the presence of an intersex person. And so many issues are, like, so many false narratives are being perpetuated around intersex that I really just felt the need to say, you know what? I think for me, it's my responsibility to just come out. One, because finding out, I felt really lonely. It's a very, very isolating experience. And especially because now when you look around people who are intersex and who have this variation, you don't find those people in South Africa very public. So, I mean, all of the people that I found were all in the US or other parts of the world. And it's very hard we don't have the same stories. So, it's very hard to identify with a person like that from a South African context. So I was like, you know what? I don't want anybody else who's going through the same thing as me to feel bad about themselves and feel like a quote unquote mutation, because that's how the biology book explains it. That I'm like, no, you are exactly the way that you need to be. And I just wanted my younger self to just get that hug from like the older sister. It was just like, you know what, girl, boy, or person, like there's nothing wrong with you. So then that's what fueled my coming out, so to speak.
Sure. And when you were, so you're 21,
yes,
and you find out,
yes,
so you obviously went to a doctor because you obviously had things that were not happening to your body that were supposed to be happening, right? When you found out, so from that time till the time you started understanding it better, were you given enough medical support? Did you have to undergo therapy? Did you understand the full-on impact of what it meant to be intersex?
So the interesting thing was, so in varsity, I majored in genetics and biochemistry.
How crazy.
How crazy. So I knew exactly when they say the SRY gene and what gene on this allele and this, I knew exactly what it is. For me, the surreal part was like, you know, in biological textbooks, you see case studies and you see those patients with black bars over their eyes. I was that patient with a black bar over the eye. Oh my gosh, I'm getting chills. And that was really surreal that I'm the case study. I'm that person. I am this person that this book is talking about. And it was, but however, what they don't tell you is how personally it makes you feel. I mean, at the time I was in a relationship and this guy and I had decided that, you know what, this is going to be like us for forever, for the rest. And you know what, we us and our soccer team of kids.
Forever, yeah.
Forever, yeah, nah. Girl. Oof, child. But I'm so happy that we didn't end up together. But anyway, so it was a very harrowing experience. I'm not gonna lie, because I mean it you deal about with the feeling of infertility, and you're like, oh my gosh, I've got XY6 chromosome. What does that make me? Am I a man now? Because now I've got internal testes. What does that make me? My testosterone is just the same as a normal guy's testosterone. Oh my gosh. And you really think about so much, and you go through this whole thing that it was really very, very devastating. And I mean, obviously then because of the impact and, you know, coming from a Black family, Christian family,
Definitely.
kids, marriage are a big thing. And, you know, even from a relationship point of view, kids are like, they can make or break a relationship. So, I mean, that the implication of that is like huge. And you ask yourself like, oh my gosh, do I want kids? Now you start thinking about things like, oh my goodness, IVF with a surrogate and an egg donor. And I mean, even that, I mean, I remember in one of my relationships that actually became a discussion about surrogacy with an egg donor. And I was just like, can I swear?
Definitely.
I'm sorry, Mom, I don't swear. So I was just like, fudge. Like, I like it was just for me it was so heartbreaking that one, it would not be my egg, and then two, I wouldn't even carry the child. So, but it's like it's all of you as the husband, but it's none of me as the wife, and then I'm supposed to just expected to just embrace this little boy,
To love them like you.
to love, or a little girl, a little baby, like love them like my own. And I was just like, you know what? And then you talk about like adoption, and then I just felt like, you know what, call it selfish or whatever, but I would rather than both of us not have any genetic material in the child, and let's adopt a totally neutral child that we both love as our own, but is not genetically ours. And that led to the relationship demise. And it's just it's
How old were you?
I was 26.
Okay.
So yeah, I've literally been from A to Z, back to A, back to Z again. And I mean, in one of my blogs, I talk about how finding out it was like going through the stages of grief, because you grow up thinking that you're gonna have kids, and it's just a normal, natural thing that's gonna bound to happen at some point. And you find out that that's not the case. That you grieve that the life that you had, you grieve the possibility of a life that you wanted. And you literally go through it, and I don't think it ever comes to an end, but I think you just get better at it. And I think now, 10, 11 years later, I'm in a much more different position from the time that I found out that I am okay. And I'm just like, you know what, I love me just the way that I am.
Sure. And now when you mention, because I watched the trailer,
Yes.
and there's a part where you're sitting with a male,
Yes.
and you have a conversation. I mean,
Yes.
it's like a love interest.
Yes, on a date.
And you mention that you're intersex, and I think he then says, I want to have many kids.
Yeah.
I want a big family.
Yes.
You know, and you break it down to him. Listen,
Yeah.
I can't. And then you just see his face switch.
Yes.
Which I don't know if it's obviously, you know how
Edited
Of
and
course.
whatever.
But so for you, in terms of dating, do you always come straightforward with it from the very onset, from the first date, or do you sort of ease into it as we get to know each other?
Okay, yeah. I think, look, I mean, I would say like my prolific relationships, I wouldn't say that that was the reason why it ended, but that had a major part in the ending of the relationship.
Sure.
So, I mean, I've moved from thinking that this person is forever, yena,
Yes.
and then and being disappointed that this person cannot handle this. Excuse me. That you are very cautious with your heart, and you become cautious, and you don't want to go too far into the relationship and only spring this up on somebody. Because then it was different. I didn't know when we got into the relationship, and I found it within the relationship. That's a different story. But now that I do know, and I know how much, and there's nothing wrong with wanting kids, just as there's nothing wrong with not wanting kids, that it's one of those very serious conversations that I have, maybe probably not on the first date, but sometimes, you know what, if naturally the conversation does go there, we talk about that, and I just let them know. But sometimes you just also don't want to tell everybody, because then you're just like, I'm not going to go with a whole script of how I'm going to plan out my day. But one thing is that if I like a person and there's genuine interest and I see there's a possibility of a future there, then I just quickly go and tell them and say, hey, listen, what's your position on kids? Okay, this is my situation, and then we take it from there. But the funny thing is how I've gone through, like I've gone through phases of like the kind of people that I dated, right? Like I dated the guys who would, like, adoption was a very big thing. You know, you just like, oh my gosh, okay, he wants to adopt. Check. Then I dated single dads. And then I dated like older guys as well. And then some who've had kids, or people that have had kids already or whatever, or done one kids. And it's just, it's the dynamics are always very interesting. But I think I said, you know what? I just come with what I want. And I say, look, let's meet you somewhere. And then, of course, you get some people that want to be knights in shining armor. Yeah, right. And then they're like, oh my gosh, no, don't worry. It's fine. It's fine that we don't have kids. But I'm like, but you want kids. And that's a big thing. It's not, we're not choosing, I want to live in Joburg, you want to live in Pretoria, let's live in Centurion. No, we're not going for a midpoint. There's no such thing as having half a child, you know, where I say, I don't want kids, but you want kids and you want your own kids. I mean, there's no guarantee that you will have your own kids. But if that's the person that you want, please don't feel sorry for me. I've been through this, and that's why I'm telling it to you early, so that we're not all invested in this relationship and then we get our hearts broken for both of us. Because I mean, heartbreak is a really, really serious thing, and I mean, it's something that when it comes to my heart, I shall protect it.
And I like how you mentioned over compromising and someone coming in. I mean, for them, it's, I'm with you, I love you, I want to be with you. So I can be, I can think I don't want kids now because it makes sense for us in the moment. I mean, I have a friend of mine who's married, and she doesn't want kids. She has never wanted kids. And when she got married, her husband said, no, I'm okay with that. We don't have to have kids, right? And 6, 7, 8 years down the line, she's been suffering from mental health issues because he now wants a child, And it's also fair for us to say people can change their minds. You can have one perception today and tomorrow want to sort of change that. You know what I mean? But now speaking on kids, even with regards to, I mean, you and I had an off-air conversation. Do you want kids? So like to adopt, and do you want to be a parent? No.
Oh, wow. So, I mean, I think throughout the whole process, I realized there is different ways to have kids, and there's no right or wrong way to have kids. As long as you have kids and you want them and you bring them to this earth and you just want to love them and give them the best. And when we spoke about like giving children the best that we can, But what this thing actually made me consider, I actually thought long and hard, because I mean, I think if I could have kids, it would have been a different story. You kind of expect, because my whole dream, I was on track. Like, like when you're on a track.
Yes.
I was on track. I was in a relationship by 21, wanted to be married by 23. started having kids, you were like, me and my husband wanted to enjoy being married. The pick 25, the picture is there. 25, I'm going to start having kids. And then 25 to 30, it's my childbearing season. And then from 30, I concentrate on my career. I don't know where was that coming from. I realized I was like, girl, you were so young and dumb, but it's okay. But then I actually realized, this actually made me think, because now if I want to have kids, I was going to have to be very intentional about it. I was like, do I want kids? And I thought about it and I just said, no.
Sure.
I actually don't feel like I would be missing anything in life if I don't have kids. For me, like, my career brings me joy. Doing the things that I do brings me joy. And I don't think I want to be a parent. I think for me, if in terms of parenting, we're doing something, my brother's 16 years younger than me. I was early, he was on time. That's what I say. My brother's 16 years younger than me.
Yeah.
And I think if it comes to parenting, that's my purpose, my brother. And for me to be able to do things for my brother that I didn't have access to as a child brings me so much joy. Like the one time I was able to pay for his, to pay so that he can go on his hockey tour, going on a plane for the first time. And I'm just like, oh my gosh. I mean, it's just those things where I'm like, I want you to be able to see the world in any way that I can, to be able to be assistance of that. So, I mean, he's not my responsibility, but I'm able to do the nice stuff, like, hey, let's go clothes shopping. And I'm like, don't tell mom and dad, but do those things that I really wanted as a child, and to be the big sister that I wanted, I mean, I was talking to my mom last night how much I grew up in a family full of adults, but I was the only child. And that was very lonely, I must say. That I honestly wish I had like a twin sibling or like an older sibling who like would get up to no good with,
Yes.
But you know what I realized? I mean, granted, my brother and I are 16 years apart, but I just want to be like the best sister that I can be. And I think in terms of taking care of somebody younger than me, I'm very happy with doing that for my brother. And yeah, I was like, I don't want children.
And how do your parents feel about that?
Oh gosh, that's a discussion that honestly you need to have again and again and again and again and again.
Can you imagine?
Because I think my dad is very accepting. My mom is also very accepting, but let me say, my dad is very easy with just like, that's my child. That's what you want. Go live your life.
Yeah.
Whereas I think with my mom, it's sometimes can be a little bit difficult to accept that. I mean, I've had to have these conversations repeatedly to just say, understand this is, and she's like, no, but don't worry, you'll change your mind. And they mean well,
Of course.
She's like, no, don't worry, you'll change your mind. But there's nothing like having a child. I'm like, but I don't need to have a child to test out that theory. Because then what if then I have a child and then I'm like,
and there's a lifelong commitment. Yeah.
It's not like a handbag. The handbag I can return. Where do I return a child? No, I can't do that. So I'm like, for all intents and purposes, and I mean, I'm not saying that I might have the same choice, Maybe I get to 40, 50 and I feel different. But right now, as a 32-year-old, looking out at my future and envisioning what is it that I want, I don't see a child. And for me, that's perfectly fine.
And for you, when you came out, how was the reception overall? So I'm thinking Black community, friends, family will always be family.
Family will always be family.
But obviously there's extended family. And also, I mean, you came out at a time where your name was out there now. So how and were you ready for the reception?
Yeah.
How was the reception?
I think when I actually initially came out, I was just like, you know what? Stuff this, I'm doing this anyway, right? And I anticipated, because you see, like, and I don't know what is the case in Caster Semenya's case, right? But you see how she had a really tough time with when her gender was brought into question.
Yeah.
And in my case, I kind of expected that as well. But you see how now privilege comes in, guys. I mean, I did I did compete in a beauty pageant.
Yes.
I mean, to say that I'm not conventionally attractive
Yes.
female would be a mess. So I'm like, the privilege there does, and for me then, like, physically, like, I don't appear like very masculine or masculine at all. So for me, people are more incurious than anything. You know, they're like, how? Okay. And it's like, oh my gosh. And then also the question always is just like, so what is down there?
I was about to ask that curiosity, what's the fine line there? I can imagine it actually gets a bit disturbing.
And I'm like, yes, when a job, do I ask you what is down there? No. So where do you get up asking me what is down there?
Yeah.
I'm a human being. That's what's down there, you know? And you also have to, guys, put your critical thinking hats on. I never ever wondered about that I was any different except for not having my period. So you're going to have to put two and two together.
Oh.
You know what? If I had ambiguous genitalia, and not that there's anything wrong with ambiguous genitalia, then I mean, I would have found out much sooner, but I don't. So kind of just read in between the lines and use your critical thinking skills where user number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So, but anyway, but I would say the reception was very positive. I think people were more curious than anything. And I will say, like, I think also the privilege of also being conventionally attractive also just kind of makes people more open as well to this. Where I think it was very challenging was when one of the media houses did put the article on Facebook. And you know when they say don't read the comments on Facebook? You don't read the comments on Facebook. Because I peeked once and I was okay. And then I remember one guy accused me. So like I said, my brother and I are 16 years apart. So I'm old enough to be his teenage mom.
Yes.
I remember I posted a photo of him and but I said my little brother. And not that I need to put a disclaimer that this is my little brother.
Sure.
I remember this guy, he said to me, he's like, yeah, no, when are you using this just to get famous?
So you're making it up?
Yeah, I'm making it up.
Okay.
I'm like, hey, boo, I know that they are con artists, but I mean, I don't think someone would generally go and say that I am different and use this. But anyway, you find all kinds of people. And not everybody is going to have a positive reaction. And most people just talk from ignorance. And some people are just mean. But I'm like, that's not a reflection on me. That's more a reflection on you.
Troll's a troll, yeah.
A troll's a troll.
That's true.
So I'm just like, So for the most part, people have been the reception has been so positive. So I honestly couldn't say, but just don't read the Facebook comments.
The fact that you mentioned pretty privilege, you know, then have you come across other intersex people that are harder time because they don't look as attractive as you do?
100%.
Okay.
100%. And I think what you will see in the documentary as well is, for me, I look at Dimakatso as just a human being who's very beautiful, but they have a very different experience from mine. And also, I would say being born in a typical female body, that's a privilege on its own, you know? Whereas somebody who doesn't have a very clear distinction of either feminine or masculine. I mean, I remember one of the intersex people that I was talking to, they're saying simple things as getting through airport security is very tricky. If they have to get searched, the woman is afraid. The man is afraid to go and search them. So it's just like, okay, who searches you? And then now when you go to the men's bathroom, men give you funny looks and they're hostile. And you go to the female bathrooms and females now want to report you to security because they're like, why is this guy using the bathroom? You know, you're too masculine to be a female, but you're too feminine to be a male. So like, where do you fit in? So it's just that very struggle of, and for me, I would say I had and there is no merit in misery Olympics, right? Like, we cannot say that you had a tougher experience. But I recognize that I've had a much easier experience than some other people have, because it is honestly terrible. I mean, Dimakatso was in hospital for most of their childhood. For 6 years, they were in hospital as a child. They had family members pull down their pants to see what is working, how their genitalia looks like. And I'm like, I mean, so I never had any of that growing up, you know? So we had a very, very different experience, and no person's experience is better or worse off, because I mean, you know what, it was still devastating to me, and just as much it may have been devastating to them, or they had their own unique experience. So again, there's no merit in the misery Olympics, but I do recognize where some privilege comes in terms of when I say I'm intersex and another person says they're intersex, we have completely different reception.
Sure. And not just for people who, I mean, I'm interested in finding out, for example, in Dimakatso's case, right? When a child is born with ambiguous genitalia, and then the surgery takes place. So this happens to a child who's a baby, who hasn't consented, who hasn't said, this is what I prefer, or this is what I want to be, or doesn't even understand what orientation is, what gender is. So do parents sign this off? How does it work?
Yeah. So that is where I think the medical fraternity is lagging behind, is that they quickly run to interventions to try and fix and normalize the child. And exactly the way that you say that there's no consent and it's their body. I mean, even honestly, my parents, I mean, as a grown person, do your parents have consent on your body? No.
Of course not.
So why, as a child, do you have consent on me? And when you realize, when you have to look and you say, is this life-threatening? Is this procedure that you want to do on this child the difference of what dead or alive? No. So, and most times you find that if ever you allow a child to say, you're exactly fine the way that you are, you know, because you actually, these surgeries do more damage than good, you know, and especially as a child, now you have to grow with all of these things. And I mean, I think Dimakatso has had multiple surgeries. It's not just one surgery. They had multiple surgeries. And you just think about, okay, where does this end? You know? And let the child grow up as they are, and then they can choose, as long as it's not life-threatening, you know? And they may very well find out that, you know what, this is the body that I was born with. I don't need to change anything. And keep it like that. And then you've saved the child a whole life of trauma.
That's true.
Added onto the actual trauma now.
Sure. And now, in South Africa, when it comes to the reception of being intersex, right? Why would you then think, for example, with this film, it's two South African individuals, but it's an international documentary, you know? Why do you think South Africa maybe wasn't the first to tell South African stories?
I think for me, you know what, it just came out to, this is an opportunity that just presented itself, and it happened to be an international filmmaker. And I think from a South African context, there could be so many reasons that it is. I mean, I told my story the best way I could from a South African context, you know. So I think that question could be directed to the filmmakers.
That's what I'm thinking. Yeah, there isn't enough.
Yeah, there isn't enough. However, though, and I think that's always the question for me. This is a team and the person that I trusted with my story to tell it. And I think throughout the whole film as well, we were given a lot of control as well into terms of how do we tell the story, you know? I mean, I never grew up in a traditional family that did in traditional practices, whereas Dimakatso did, and they went to then see a traditional healer. But for me, I didn't. And I was very clear in certain aspects to say, listen, I get that you want to tell a South African story, but this is not, you wouldn't be telling my story. You would be telling just a generalized story. And I was very, very clear about that. And I think that's the thing that I really appreciated, that we had really great level of input in terms of being in control of how our stories are told.
And when it comes to representation, do you think that in South Africa, because I think there's a big focus now on, for example, lesbians, gays, transgender. Do you think being intersex, do you think you have enough representation? I know you're a big voice within the community. So do you think that enough is being done in terms of awareness?
Yeah.
Also, what more can be done?
Yeah. So I think, I mean, there's great organizations such as the Ranti and Intersex South Africa that are really doing amazing work. But I think just with any minority group, it's very hard. And I think the biggest thing for us is just education. education from the medical fraternity, education to people in rural areas that don't have easily access to information, excuse me, education to just the normal person out there, that they know what intersex is, and when a child is born and there's visible variations, that it's not like, whoa, okay, oh my gosh, what is this, but I mean, we know, like, oh, that's just a normal thing that happens from time to time. And I think the biggest thing for me, I would say, is just education and acceptance.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, we are all different. We all, if a tiny baby is born, they don't like, ow, this baby is too tiny, let's stretch the legs at birth, and if the baby is too tall, no, you were born with these differences, and these are just differences that should be accepted. But I think that is where the big work needs to be done, is just from education and, like you say, representation. So there definitely are amazing organizations that are really doing the hard work out there that I really give props to.
And your journey, because I mean, you say now you found out at 21, you're 32 now, right? So that whole 10, 11, 12 years now, has it been heavy to carry? There's one thing to be an activist, but then to also carry a personal story.
Yeah.
Have you found that you have had moments where, because I'm having to stand proud, but this is also a very personal journey?
Definitely. But I will tell you and say, I've had an easier experience now that I'm out, so to speak, than when I didn't talk about it. Because I think it's just seeing that injustice and seeing that false information that you're just like, it's very hard, right? And I think for me, I love activists, and I give my props off to activists, right? But I think for me, the biggest thing is that I am very, I think, intentional in the way that I would say, perform my activism type of thing. That I don't want this to be, I don't want to make a career out of it.
Yes.
And not that somebody who makes a career out of it, there's anything wrong. That is someone's life's purpose, and I can never talk that down. However, in my case, I think I said, you know what? For the fact that there's no one who's saying, I'm a man and I'm activist for man, why do I need to be an activist for women? Yeah, but for being an intersex woman. And I mean, I get that women's rights activists is a completely different story because of patriarchy.
Yeah.
But for the normal guy, there's no activism for being a man. So I'm like, I don't want that. This is just something about me. This is not just the whole me.
True.
This is just one other thing. So just as a person is female, married, wife, whatever profession that you are in, this is just one of the things about me when you describe me. So I didn't want
it not to Sharon-Rose is.
No.
Yeah. Yes. Sure. And I think one of the other questions that I really have for you then is with regards to your work. So now, obviously, you're saying you don't want this to be something where you're saying, I am going to run on having activism as my profession. Do you plan to, for example, after this film, are you open to more things that involve you in terms of awareness for being an intersex woman?
Definitely.
Okay.
Definitely. And I think that's where representation is so important. Because the one thing that I would love to be known as, like, oh my gosh, Sharon-Rose Khumalo, CEO of a listed company who is also intersex, And then you can go to events, talk about being intersex, but you can also then talk about being a woman in corporate South Africa and still do that. So for me, definitely, but I think it's just a matter of choosing what is priority at that time. But the one thing that I think I will not do is I will not keep quiet.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know that you mentioned Facebook. Your on that we're having now, and how the trolls were trolling.
Yes.
Do you then think, what do you think we can do? Because I think a lot of people, even within the community at large, have an issue with, it's one thing to, when it comes to your family and your friends, you can be comfortable being yourself and share your real thoughts and experiences. But social media is such an ugly world. It's created such an intense and dark space for people. So you could be a young lady who's 20 going through what you were going through before seeing a doctor. And some of the things you're seeing on social media can be a complete turn-off in terms of taking the next step of just really loving who you are, you know? So I think for you personally, when it comes to social media, what do you think we can do right? Because it's really going wrong.
Yeah. No, 100%. And you know what? I think social media can be a very ugly place, right? But it's also a very beautiful place as well.
Love hate. It's a big love hate.
And it's just about just finding that balance. You know, I think for me, it's just a matter of finding that balance and focusing on the good.
Yeah.
Because for me, if I get trolled by 100 people, but one person sends me an inbox and say, "Hey, I was also diagnosed with this variation. Hey, I am exactly the same way, and thank you so much for speaking about it. My work is done." I did it for that one person, you know? And my goal here is that, and I always tell people, they're like, "Oh my gosh, I can't wait until I'm like emotionally strong enough like you to come out." I'm like, "Babes, understand that you don't need to come out. Nobody comes out and says, 'Oh my gosh, world, let me tell you, I am a man.'" You know, no, you don't need to come out. But if you really feel like it's really important for you to speak out on it, speak out on it. And that's the thing that I think, that's the place for me that I would love to get to, where a person is accepted by the immediate surroundings just for who they are, that they don't feel they need to come out. It's not that when they come out, don't come out, it shouldn't make a difference. And I think for the most thing, and I think even from social media, is that do it if you're strong enough. And always, I think for me, it's always how much do I share?
Yeah.
And you have to be very careful about that, to say, how much do I share? And there's certain stuff that I will not share, that I would love to keep to myself. And I do that. So it's just a matter of choosing what I'm comfortable with sharing. And I just choose then to focus on the good rather than the bad. Because I mean, you know what? Trolls are gonna troll.
It will never end. Yeah. And have you had young girls come to you and say, "This is my story, I see myself in you"? And
so many.
Oh man.
So many. I will have people but it can DM me on Instagram after they saw a TikTok video that I did. I will have people DM me on Twitter seeing this on Instagram. Like from all over not just South Africa, all over the world. I'll have a person from Kenya saying, "Hey, I'm going through exactly the same thing. Thank you so much for speaking." Na, 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 na. And it's honestly, that is so reaffirming in terms of saying, you know what, my job is done.
I can imagine
that's the most fulfilling. That's my thing, is that if one person can come to me and just say, "Thank you so much for this," that my job is done. If a parent says, "You know what, my child was born with this variation," my job is done.
Have you had parents as well too, hey, come through and say?
When I did a radio interview, a parent called in the one time, like years ago, and it was just like, see, and for me, I think, speaking of parents, I think parents may also feel like it's their fault. Because, I mean, they brought the child into this world. They may feel like, is it something that I did? Is it something that I did during pregnancy? And it's like, there's absolutely nothing you could have done in your control.
There's no DNA linked to.
No, there is DNA linked to my variation specifically. But there is, and I mean, but you don't sit there during ovulation and control which gene.
Not at all.
Way and which which sperm fertilizes. So you can't control that. I mean, up until, well, with IVF and everything, you can do that. But up until then, you can exactly control the genes and everything. I mean, there's nothing that humanly possible that you could have done that could have altered the effect of this, you know?
So I'm getting messages here as we have our conversation, messages from our crew. And Oshabawa to Ding Dong, Kuru, you are just sort of with those looks, girls, just doing it.
Thank you.
And then I wanted just to ask then, with regards to the documentary, when can we expect to see it in South Africa?
All right. Oh my gosh, guys, you ask a very difficult question. Okay. We are planning. So let me just say, in the next few months,
Yes.
expect to be able to see it in one way or another in
Yes.
South Africa.
Yes.
And we will share that information with you. Yeah, because it's very different. And I mean, I think for me, one of the learning curves is just in terms of filmmaking, how everything happens is that there's a whole film festival circuit that goes before a film lands in cinema, before film lands on TV or whatever. You know, there's still so much that can happen and that you can do. So, yeah.
And in terms of Sharon-Rose model, have you put the sash down?
Girl,
They are so remember. Do not even talk about age and stuff because there's so many pageants.
I know. I would say I've comfortably put the sash down. I've comfortably put the high heels down, and I'm okay with that. I think, I mean, when I was a teenager, I wanted to the one thing that I wanted to do was just like Milan, Paris, New York, be a model, IMG models, you know.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think now I'm in a space in my career where I really love what I do, and I really enjoy it. And unfortunately, it comes in conflict with modeling, so to speak. That I mean, people ask, but you can model on the weekends. I'm like, babe, those people don't work on the weekends. This is their job. This is their 9 to 5. So for you to go to castings, to go to shoots, that's going to be during my work time, and it's kind of that opportunity cost between choosing to do this, but you're missing out on that. But I would say, like, I'm happy to miss out on that because I mean, the work that I do now in my 9 to 5 is also so fulfilling, and it's something where I really see my growth happening, and just very happy about it.
And speaking on Miss South Africa, just want your opinion on this. I think I've had this convo with several people.
Yes.
It's become so inclusive now, extremely inclusive. But also there are platforms that are meant for that kind of inclusivity, if you get what I mean. So do you think we've ruined the pageant?
No.
Okay. So even with having a Mrs. South Africa now, you think that Miss South Africa being as inclusive is correct?
Correct. And I think for me, it's why do we have to have this? My thing is that what is the goal of the Miss South Africa role?
Yeah.
Ask yourself that, right? And then if you start from that point, you say, okay, then let's find a person who can do that. From a beauty pageant, because at the end of the day, this is a beauty pageant. From a beauty pageant point of view, find somebody that, and I mean, it's trends change and come and go, and your body honestly has nothing. Your body and your face have no bearing in how many lives you can touch.
Sure.
You know, with the actual work that you do, it may help you get into certain spaces, but does it really have any bearing into doing that? But at the end of the day, it's a beauty competition, and you cannot please everybody. And you know what? We live in an age where you have a choice whether to take part or not take part. You have a choice whether to watch it or not to watch it. So if you don't believe in it, why are you wasting your own time and putting yourself through misery watching a competition that you're only going to hate on?
Also,
let people do what it is. And I mean, my whole thing about feminism is just giving women the agency to make a choice that they make. If you want to be a housewife, babes, kudos to you. If you want to chase your career and slay dragons and in a male-dominated industry, kudos to you too. Do that. And I mean, for me, it does not make that this one is more a woman than that one. It's just, you're just a human being, and that's just the most important thing for me.
You know, I noticed that when I was going through your pageant years, you actually rocked your afro. Yeah, you rocked that afro. You got on the stage and you were
yes.
How important was that natural part of you coming on to such a aesthetic stage?
Yes. So I will tell you the whole journey about how the whole hair situation came in, right? And I remember hair was a very big conversation in the year that I entered.
Yeah.
And you look at years such as Zozibini Tunzi winning and really redefining the face of Miss South Africa. And then you're like, I can go be a Miss South Africa with my fade. Okay, let's do that, you know? Whereas I think in the earlier years, that wouldn't necessarily have happened. And I'm so happy for people like this, and that the organization has actually made it so inclusive to the discussion also around hair. And how the whole story with my hair coming in, I entered Miss South Africa the year before I actually made it to the semi-finalist and then finalist, with extensions in. So I did like a clip in extensions.
Okay.
So I went in there, didn't make it through, disappointed. The following year, I then entered. And I remember by this time I was with an agency, and then I asked them, I was like, look, what's your advice? Should I get a wig or should I go with my natural hair? And they're like, you know what? If you're going to get a wig, it has to be a really good wig. Yeah, me with my chocolate extensions didn't cut it. So they're like, if you're gonna get a wig, make sure like it's really good extensions, it's good quality hair, and we all know how much good quality hair costs. And at that time, it was not feasible. So I went with my natural hair, and there was a hair that I always used to love doing with the dry curl. And I remember the morning of the audition, it started raining, so now they don't dry quickly. And the night before, getting ready with everything, it was a total disaster. So my hair actually was not at my audition, even from the pictures that they took at my audition. My hair, listen, no, it wasn't happening. It wasn't giving what I wanted it to give.
Yeah.
But I think it actually what the blessing in disguise is that also set me apart in terms of whatever. And then I was during the judging rounds. Then I was asked if I were to change my hair, if I were to like if during the makeover stages, right? And at that time I was like, yeah, I would, you know. And then that was during the semi-finalist round. And then we did final interviews, and then I went home. And then over the time, I thought about it. And then we had final interviews. And then I said, listen, I remember you asked me about, they said, is there something that else did you want to say? And I said, yes. During the previous round, you had asked me about my hair and if I were willing to change. And I said, I've actually thought about it, and I would love to compete in my natural hair. If I were to stay in the competition, I would love to compete with my natural hair. So that was a deliberate choice that I made to compete with my natural hair. And my stance in choosing to compete with my natural hair, I said that, and again, going back to the agency to make your own choices, even with hair, like the conversation of hair was so divisive that because you've got Asian hair, now you're less black or you're less Afro, you're less. No, guys, at the end of the day, my values shouldn't be defined by the type of hair that I wear. Even today, I can comfortably wear my wig and then just say, you know what, it does not define who I am. But I think what is very important is representation, and these kind of spaces need to include. And I mean, when you look at the current contestants now, and you look at the diversity of hair and the diversity of, I mean, I'm happy to see that, because at the end of the day, you don't want kids doing questionable things to attain a certain beauty standard. But if we can say, just the way you are, you're perfect. Do not just grow into the person that you want to be. And a girl can see a Miss SA contestant with a fade, and then they're like, I love it.
And I see myself.
I see myself in her. And that's why representation, I mean, even simple thing as having a black Ariel in the mermaid.
Yes.
That's so important, because then little girls and little people are growing up seeing themselves in other people. And that's what we want at the end of the day.
So before we wrap up, I want to take a bit from what we've discussed. Pageant, young girls, social media, and how can I put it? The obsession with looking perfect. When it comes to young girls, what do you know? It's one thing for us to go for talks and we say, we're here to empower you. But you speak today, you empower them. Tomorrow they're back to their own lives, you know? What do you think we can do to, Black girl, love yourself as you are in your skin, despite the challenges, despite the status quo.
Yeah.
But also trying to defy what we're seeing online, because perfection, we're buying bodies, we're buying hair, we're buying skin. What can we do?
I think the biggest thing is where parents come in. I mean, you as a mom, me as an older sister, at the end of the day, we are the people with more knowledge and more experience that we really need to, even in our own lives, that a child must know. So an anecdote is my little cousins are like in grade 7 and 5 or 6, right? And then they were telling their mom, who's my aunt, they're like, now when I grow up, I want to be like Tlhotlo. I don't want to get married young.
Ooh,
I want to eat my own money.
okay.
I want to live by myself in my own apartment and drive my own car. And I was like, do you understand that what that does? Seeing their older cousin living that life, seeing their older cousin being this person, that you don't have to be famous to be like a trailblazer or representation. And me as a speaker, I only have a set time in front of the person, but the person who's there constantly is you as the adult in that child's life. That I think us as the adult in our child's life is just to be the embodiment of representation. That if ever we come from a family of dark-skinned individuals, love yourself. And whatever it is, and if you choose to skin lighten, babe, but like understand also, it's just that, but there is somebody out there who will give the child representation of this is beautiful, and we are all beautiful. And I think that's the biggest thing that I think we can do, and that comes in when you're authentically being yourself.
Yes.
Whatever choice that it is you want to make, that you want to wear a wig, wear a wig. That you want to wear your natural hair, wear your natural hair. Do what you got to do, but be authentically you. Do what I think that's the thing that I've also learned, like, which has really been solidified of late now at the age of 32, is just authentically being yourself. And we were talking about drawing boundaries, and that's where boundaries comes in drawing. And you just say, look, I don't have to explain myself that I want to do 1, 2, 3, but as long as it doesn't hurt anybody else and this is what makes me happy, I'm going to do it. And it is okay. That's the biggest thing. And that's the thing.
We spoke about this. It's okay.
It's okay.
That's the theme of the show. It's okay.
It's okay.
And for anyone out there, what's next for Sharon-Rose?
Oh my gosh. I think you're just going to see Sharon Lehlogonolo being more of herself. And I say herself very intentionally. So I think the one thing that you will see in the documentary, which I can't wait for you to see, is the moment where I come to realization to say what makes a woman. Oof, right? And I think for me, I'm at a stage in my life where I am more sure of what makes me a woman, what makes me a human being, what makes me Lehlogonolo, that I'm just authentically going to pursue that. And for me, that's the only thing. So for me also, if you see me in a few years and I disappear from social media and live a quiet life, don't be surprised. We just want to do that. And I think for me, that's the biggest thing. I am looking forward to growing my career. I am looking forward to traveling. I am looking forward to life, love, and fun.
And where can people follow you? Where can we find you on the social?
All right. On Instagram, it is Lehlogonolo_K, as well as on Twitter, which I'm not really active on because of late, because the trolls or just the negativity. But on TikTok, also on TikTok _Lehlogonolo. And then also my DIY homepage, YouTube, LK Home DIY, Instagram, LK Home DIY.
We didn't make it to talk about that.
I know,
so much to talk about. But thank you so much for coming.
It is my
It was so insightful. It was so insightful. We really appreciate it. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. That was such an amazing episode. Sure, don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. And tune in as we continue unpacking our women's edition on the social with the Prince. To me and mine, to you and yours, have a fantastic week further. We'll catch you next week. Itaola.